All right, good afternoon, everybody. A beautiful Monday, and offseason has finally settled down a little bit with the 49ers calling their offseason program and us having, about a month and a half before training camp. So it's a good time to just let the dust of the offseason settle, especially since this has been, instead of my Twitter mentions lately. At this point, it should be clear that all along it was the 49ers' preferred plan to draft Trey Lance and keep Jimmy Garoppolo aboard for at least this 2021 season. But for some reason, there still seems to be some misinformation surrounding the issue. A lot of it's just in my mentions. Some followers seem to be confused about what's actually happening. There obviously have been some articles and reports over the past several months that have pointed people in multiple different directions. A lot of it involves the name Mac Jones that upset a lot of people for a while. A lot of it involved speculation that turned out to be wildly incorrect, that the 49ers were really close to jettisoning Jimmy Garoppolo. So I hope that for what's the last time, we can just sit down, summarize, and contextualize the chaos of this past offseason and the quarterback journey that the 49ers put on all in one spot. And then hopefully after this, we can all move forward in peace with actual understanding of what the 49ers are trying to do. To begin, we just cannot lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is that the 49ers' overarching goal this offseason was to beef up the quarterback room. Now, there are obviously several ways to accomplish this overarching goal, which was why we heard that the 49ers were at least interested in almost every single quarterback discussion of the offseason. They popped their head in the door right before Detroit traded Matt Stafford to the Rams. They obviously monitored the Deshaun Watson situation. They are obviously at least interested in a player like Andy Dalton. And then, of course, they made the huge monumental trade up to number 3 to ultimately draft Trey Lance. So the 49ers' fingerprints were all over the quarterback carousel and the quarterback news cycle this offseason. And I think that's what made a lot of people get carried away. And by carried away, I mean that they forgot what Kyle Shanahan said very clearly last year, and it's remained true throughout. Kyle Shanahan said that he expected Jimmy Garoppolo to be the starter in 2021, way back in 2020 when Jimmy Garoppolo was hurt. And Kyle Shanahan was not lying. The most likely way for the 49ers to beef up their quarterback room would be to add depth behind Jimmy Garoppolo. They still see him as being worth his salary. It ranks, number 12 of all quarterbacks. And they have emphasized, both Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have repeated over and over again that their main problem with Jimmy Garoppolo has been his inability to stay healthy in 2018 and 2020, and not his play when he's actually been on the field. So in this whole rumor carousel, I think people lost sight of the fact that this has been a pillar of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's thinking the whole time. And they've been publicly very, very adamant about this, that they like Jimmy Garoppolo when he's healthy and that they expect him to be the starter in 2021. John Lynch even clearly emphasized this way back in February when he said that he, quote unquote, had no doubt that Garoppolo would be the 2021 starter. And he emphasized that the goal, again, was the overarching one of beefing up the quarterback room. So at that point, we're back in that February 2021 timeframe. The real question was this: what type of quarterback depth would the 49ers pursue? Would they add a veteran backup through free agency, or would they kill two birds with one stone and try to make a future-facing play by drafting a rookie quarterback? Those were the two options for the 49ers. And, as much obfuscation as there's been, as much confusion as there's been, I think it's always been very clear, and we need to keep in mind that they always, constantly through this whole process, wanted to beef up the quarterback room, and those were their two options. And that's the lens through which we have to view everything that happened in this offseason. Now, you know that I predicted that the 49ers would draft Trey Lance a few weeks before the draft. But I think it's more key to note that I first mentioned that they might be interested in Trey Lance way before then, back in January, on the morning of the conference title games. I think I wrote that it would be smart for the 49ers to pick a QB. And then when I mentioned Trey Lance, I said they could benefit from giving a quarterback like Lance development time behind center alongside Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, the reason I bring this up is because we now also know that the 49ers were eyeing Trey Lance way back then in January. And I have to note that I talked to talent evaluators. I talked to several people already by then in January, not affiliated with the 49ers because they kept this all close to the vest. But the people that evaluate talent, that know film, that I had talked to by January and February, all were enthusiastic about 4 quarterbacks. They were Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance. The one name that I didn't just mention was Mac Jones, because based on the conversations that I had in January and February, there just was not overwhelming enthusiasm regarding Mac Jones. In fact, I would say that it was just the opposite. I think talent evaluators overwhelmingly considered Mac Jones a worse prospect than what I call the Big Four. By the Big Four, I mean Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance. Mac Jones just wasn't part of that conversation. And I'm going to come back to this Mac Jones stuff, but I'm just laying out the timeline of how the offseason worked. And in January, February, even into March, Mac Jones just wasn't a large player in the conversation of elite quarterback picks. And by that, I mean guys that could potentially go in the top 5 of the 2021 draft. So that led us to free agency in March. The question remained, how exactly would the 49ers go about deepening their quarterback room? They were interested in Andy Dalton. There is no denying that. That would have been option A, not necessarily the top option, but there was 2 options, right? It was either the rookie option or the veteran option, and that would have been the veteran option. They could have done that with Andy Dalton through free agency. But the 49ers only would have done that. They only would have considered Andy Dalton a very, very inexpensive deal. So you look at Dallas last year. They got Andy Dalton to be their backup quarterback at $3 million for the season, which is hardly anything. Once Dalton signed with Chicago for $10 million, over 3 times as much as his price tag in 2020, I mean, that's lower level starter money, as we've seen, because Dalton, is the guy there along with Justin Fields now in Chicago. Once that happened, that was a non-starter for the 49ers. Andy Dalton, that option went out the window. And I think it's, around that point that the 49ers, they were already considering this trade up, and they were considering this all the way back to January, but they didn't pull the trigger until late March. And it's around the point of free agency when it was clear that the veteran option wasn't the best option based on some of these price tags, that the 49ers decided that they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to make that aggressive trade up to number 3 so they could draft potential transcendence in the quarterback room. And they also wanted to keep Jimmy Garoppolo to maintain that win now quality, ready to win quality for at least the start of the 2021 season. They hit that fork in the road on March 29th. They made that trade up to number 3. And that leads me to my key thought. Trey Lance was their favorite rookie prospect to fit their desired parameters, to have their cake and eat it too. And they had every reason to keep their intentions quiet about Trey Lance. They didn't owe anybody any information, especially the media. It was Shanahan's job obligated him to conduct a sound decision-making process about all of this, worthy of that big risk that he was taking. I mean, this was a huge, huge gamble. As much as Shanahan tries to minimize it, I disagree with that. This was such a big gamble that I think that the 49ers needed to do absolute due diligence, and the best way that they could do that was in complete secrecy, which is what we saw them do. So we've hit the inflection point, right? We're kind of letting this all marinate as the 49ers are moving through the process this offseason. And don't worry, I'm going to open it up to questions after this. I know that we have a lot of questions already up on there, but I just wanted to get some water here. I've reached March 29th on my timeline, and now I want to move forward to what people say is the real meat of this issue. But I think that it's so key to consider the context before March 29th and what the 49ers were thinking about doing before that day. And what their stated goal at the beginning of the offseason was, because the option that they chose, the aggressive trade up and then the drafting of Trey Lance, fits in perfectly with what they were saying all along. I think that's extremely important to consider. They wanted to have Lance and they wanted to have Garoppolo. They budgeted it for both. When they did pull the trigger on that day for that trade and subsequently almost immediately said they wanted to keep Garoppolo that year, they were swinging for the fences. They were trying to have the best of both worlds. So why trade up? I think that's one of the big questions that needs to be addressed in any proper summary of what happened. We can start with the fact that there were at least 3 teams between number 3 and number 12, the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Broncos, that might have taken Trey Lance if he had been available. I'm not sure if they would have taken Trey Lance, but those 3 teams who were between number 3, where the 49ers traded up to, and number 12, where the 49ers originally were, certainly were in the running for him. And they, I would say with great certainty that they would have become even more interested in a player like Trey Lance had the 49ers remained at number 12 and started aggressively scouting Trey Lance and not hid that. I think that's all common sense. I think that all those are the natural pitfalls of not having the higher draft pick and showing your cards on the scouting circuit. Other teams were definitely interested in Trey Lance. I can't say with certainty they would have picked him between number 3 and number 12, but I think there's a very good chance, and I think that the 49ers showing their cards early by staying at 12 and then still scouting Trey Lance, I think that might have put some other teams onto the scent. Okay, so the next question, why keep it quiet even after the trade up? Why the intense secrecy? I mean, even the offensive coordinator for the 49ers, Mike McDaniel, didn't know Shanahan's pick ahead of time. And I believe that logic answers that question too. Look who held the pick right above the 49ers, the New York Jets. And look at the New York Jets coaching staff. The Jets staff had literally been the 49ers coaching staff about 4 months prior. So there's no way that the 49ers would risk telegraphing their intentions to draft Lance to a Jets coaching staff that obviously held Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers' entire operation in extremely high regard. The Jets ended up picking Zach Wilson. We all know that. But we also know that, football's a game of, it's a copycat league, especially when these coaching staffs proliferate to, other spots around the NFL. They're going to take the ideas that they learned with them. The 49ers know this better than any other franchise. The whole Bill Walsh coaching tree was born of the 49ers. Well, Kyle Shanahan is developing his own coaching tree. Guys are starting to leave now. Robert Saleh is the coach of the Jets. The Jets could steal some of the 49ers' ideas. And if the 49ers make it very publicly known that Trey Lance is their man, that this is the dual threat quarterback that they, have circled as potential transcendence in the long-term future of the franchise, that would at least pique the Jets staff interest in year 1 of running the show in New York. They would at least go back over their notes and be like, oh, wait, we're looking for a long-term option. This is a long-term rebuild in New York with the Jets. Are we sure that we don't want to take a closer look at the guy the 49ers really like? Because we were just coaching the 49ers and Shanahan got us this job about 4 months ago. I mean, the 49ers' success led to the Jets coaching staff having a job with the New York Jets right now. That's undisputed. So it makes all the logical sense in the world for the 49ers to be quiet about their intentions at number 3, with the Jets looming ahead of them at number 2. You just don't want that related coaching staff to know what you're going to be doing. Beyond that, as we've seen, the 49ers treat option power as gold, as they should. A team maximizes its chances of a wonderful offer falling into its lap if its competition is guessing about what it may or may not do with its most valuable assets, period. I mean, you could talk about setting fans' expectations or setting media expectations all you want. At the end of the day, this is a cutthroat game of business. So it's not a game, it's business. And in business, if you hold your cards close to the vest, you maximize the chances of something great falling into your lap. So in the case of Jimmy Garoppolo and who might the 49ers pick at number 3, well, if you don't let anybody know, you maximize the chances of getting an awesome offer for Jimmy Garoppolo that could be franchise altering. Is it likely? Probably not. But why would you just pour water on the fire and extinguish the chance before it even comes? You're only extinguishing chances by revealing your cards. This is a multi-billion-dollar competitive industry. You do not give yourself an intentional competitive disadvantage. You take every single competitive advantage that you can possibly have. And that's what the 49ers did in this situation by keeping quiet at number 3. Now, we'll never know what they might have been offered or not offered for Jimmy Garoppolo, but we do know they were adamant about keeping their options open throughout the whole process. They constantly said, we expect to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. That is the most likely course of action, but they never fully ruled out trading him, which means that they were open to really enjoy the benefits and yield the benefits of their option power. And that's how they proceeded into the draft. And I think it all worked out. Obviously, they didn't trade Garoppolo, but I think that they got their best of both worlds scenario, in which they got both Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster, obviously with Garoppolo as the quarterback 1 for now and Lance as their potential man for the future. So that brings us back to Mac Jones. Might Mac Jones have grown on Shanahan during the intensive deep dive throughout April? Might have Mac Jones answered all those skeptical evaluations from the talent people that I talked to in January and February, and might have turned the narrative, reversed the narrative surrounding his game into something more positive in the 49ers meeting rooms? Absolutely, sure. I think that's entirely possible. And Kyle Shanahan has even talked a lot about that. Tim Kawakami, my colleague, had a great interview with Shanahan on the Athletics podcast on the TK show the other day, where Shanahan talked extensively about liking Mac Jones and what Mac Jones brought to the table and what he can bring to the table for New England, and hey, what he might have brought to the table for the 49ers had they somehow picked him. But that doesn't mean that the 49ers were ever seriously considering picking Mac Jones. He was in the competition, sure. It was part of the deep dive, sure. But all actual available evidence suggests that Jones was never the 49ers' favorite candidate. The actual evidence here, if we erase all the noise, all the echo chamber stuff, all the reports, which couldn't have been factual because they weren't coming from inside the very tightly sealed 49ers room. If we look at all of that, it all points to a Garoppolo-Lance pairing in the 49ers quarterback room being the plan all along. We can follow the money. The 49ers clearly budgeted to keep both Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance the whole time. We can follow stats and usage rates. Mac Jones started the same amount of games as Trey Lance in college, 17, and Lance had way more experience in play action and pro-style offenses. In fact, Jones only ran play action from under center at Alabama 1% of the time. Trey Lance was something like 35 or 40%. We can follow the words. Shanahan had been clear on his preference for a dual threat quarterback for quite some time. That dates back to glowing about Josh Allen after playing the Bills, and even saying that his ideal quarterback, and this was right before the draft, was someone who could throw like Breeze and run like Lamar Jackson. And we can actually follow the 49ers pre-draft evaluation process in this situation. Shanahan had John Beck, who's one of his closest QB confidants, go out of his way to work with Trey Lance. He also had Jordan Matthews, one of his former NFL receivers, go out of his way to run routes at Lance's pro day. John Beck did work with Justin Fields, but the receiver treatment did not come to Justin Fields' pro day, and none of the other options, especially Mac Jones, got that type of specialized attention before the draft. And I consider all of those to be little breadcrumbs of evidence for the 49ers ultimately picking Trey Lance. And finally, we could summarize the actual logic that the 49ers simply wouldn't have traded up from number 12 to number 3 to obtain anything less than a situation that featured both a short-term solution and potential long-term transcendence at the quarterback room. You don't spend that much capital to not try for the best of both worlds. And that meant a Garoppolo-Lance quarterback room, and that's what we have today. It certainly didn't mean trading all of that capital to go up from number 12 to number 3 to pick a guy who would have been available at number 12 anyway. And that's what we've seen right now with Mac Jones being picked later on, number 15, by the Patriots. So all those initial evaluations were correct, the ones in January and February. The 49ers saw what the NFL did, and that was that Mac Jones was the worst prospect in the big four quarterbacks. You could say that he's a good prospect. I'm not saying he's not. Throughout the entire pre-draft process, I said that I liked a lot about what Mac Jones brought to the table. But I didn't like him as much as the other four guys, especially Trey Lance. Now Trey Lance is the 49er, so we can eliminate all that noise. We can eliminate the echo chamber stuff that we've heard over the last several months. And I think we could see a very clear path from point A to point B. Point A being the 49ers expected Garoppolo to remain, but they needed to beef up the quarterback room. And point B, they've beefed up the quarterback room, and they have Garoppolo still on the team heading into 2021. So much of this is rooted in the money. The 49ers initially anticipated a $230 million salary cap for this season. This is way back when they were charting their initial course. They got a $182.5 million salary cap instead. They lost nearly $50 million of working operating room throughout the whole pandemic and its economic after effects. Jimmy Garoppolo, who they still find to be under contract at a good price for the next 2 seasons, is no longer on the books after the 2022 season. So as the 49ers try to become cap efficient into the future and to build something as sustainable as possible, they really like the prospect of a quarterback on a rookie deal, which they have Trey Lance under team control for at least 5 more years, because there's going to be an option in that 5th season if they want it on the first round pick. So you have him under an inexpensive, affordable rookie deal all the way through the 2024 season, which means that theoretically, if you're the 49ers and Trey Lance not ready yet, you can even keep Garoppolo in 2022. That's a bridge that we can't cross yet because we don't know how Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play in 2021. But what we do know is that the 49ers are armed for both the short term and the long term entering this 2021 season. And I think that's what's really important. That's what they charted out at the very start of this. That's what they have achieved right now. I'm not ready to judge whether this was a good move or not. I mean, the 49ers took a big risk. I still think it's a big risk, but I do know that I can't jump to a hot take right now to evaluate its success because we haven't seen Trey Lance on an NFL game day field yet, and we haven't seen what Jimmy Garoppolo is going to do in 2021. Evaluating this move will have both its short-term and its long-term components. So why don't we just hold off judgment and enjoy the show while it lasts? That's my position on all this, and if you guys want, I'll take some questions. Oh, a lot of them on here. How big of a leash does Jimmy get this season? If he is the starter week 1, that's from Mario N. I think it's Trey Lance's time to play will depend entirely on Trey Lance, assuming Garoppolo stays healthy. So the minute that Trey Lance, if this does happen, gives the 49ers a better chance to win than Jimmy Garoppolo, something that Kyle Shanahan would gauge through practice, that is the minute that Trey Lance becomes the starter. The issue there, and a lot of people are going to jump to conclusions, no, Trey Lance is going to start week 1. Trey Lance is not better than Jimmy Garoppolo right now. People underestimate the difficulty of becoming a masterful starting quarterback in the NFL. And Jimmy Garoppolo had become very, very proficient within the context of the 49ers offense by the 2019 season. They didn't make the Super Bowl by accident. So it's not going to be easy for Trey Lance to get to the spot of superseding Jimmy Garoppolo in this very first year. Kyle Shanahan has even been quoted as saying Trey Lance is not coming in and trying to replace a bridge quarterback. Shanahan repeatedly has called Jimmy Garoppolo a very good quarterback. If you have issue with that, take it up with Kyle Shanahan. But Kyle Shanahan clearly thinks that Jimmy Garoppolo is a very good quarterback. So if he stays healthy, which is the gigantic caveat here, it's going to take a while for Trey Lance to supersede him. Trey Lance would have to come into training camp and absolutely blow everybody away at a level that I don't think we've seen before from somebody who has only played FCS level ball, and his last major extended action was 2 seasons ago. So we're just being realistic about this, and so is Shanahan. And there's nothing wrong with having good short-term and long-term options, but we need to view the trade for Trey Lance as a long-term play for the 49ers. People need to quit viewing it as a short-term play. Keeping Garoppolo is a short-term play. Trading up for Trey Lance is a long-term play. These two can coexist. It's not one or the other. These two are coexisting on the 49ers roster right now. I mean, I don't agree. Mac Jones should have been drafted. He should have been drafted where he was drafted. It all ended up, I mean, somebody here said that Mac Jones shouldn't have been drafted. He was drafted at number 15, and I'm sure the Patriots are happy about their investment. They didn't have to trade up or do anything crazy to get Mac Jones. I mean, the guy set records at Alabama and was tremendously efficient. There's no reason to bash Mac Jones. It was the whole rumor mill process surrounding the 49ers draft evaluation process that was the problem, not Mac Jones himself. But Shanahan even said that on TK's podcast, is that he felt bad for Mac Jones. He was taking all this heat for no reason, just because people had put this boogeyman in their heads that Mac Jones is who the 49ers had traded up for. They hadn't traded up for Mac Jones. Mac Jones is a fine player, great player for number 15. I'm sure the Patriots are going to be happy with him. But Kyle Shanahan wanted something more, and that's something I didn't touch on in my little introductory talk there. Kyle Shanahan wanted to add the rushing component to the quarterback position. In the long term, he wants a guy that can also get it done with his legs. Kyle Shanahan wants what his dad, Mike Shanahan, had in Steve Young and John Elway. And Steve Young and John Elway are potential transcendents if that's what you eventually get from Trey Lance. That's why it was worth trading so much to get those guys. Now, neither Steve Young nor John Elway was created overnight. So that means that you look at the situation with Trey Lance and you don't anticipate that he'll be created overnight either. So you count it as a blessing that you have Jimmy Garoppolo there for a very reasonable price. 26, 27 million is reasonable right now. That's another fallacy floating around. It's the number 12 ranked quarterback contract in the league. It's totally fine. You budget for it. You keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster until Trey Lance has a chance to become your future transcendent talent. But it doesn't mean that you don't spend on Trey Lance right now. You get him right now because you're thinking about when Garoppolo's contract expires and you're thinking about the long-term future. But that has absolutely nothing to do, in my opinion, with Mac Jones, which is why I never picked Mac Jones to be drafted by the 49ers. I saw Mac Jones as a middle of the first round, late in the first round kind of guy. That's where he ended up going. So nothing against Mac Jones, but the trade up was to get somebody else than Mac Jones. Yeah, from Kali Young, was Justin Fields ever in the quarterback equation? He absolutely was in the quarterback equation. He worked with John Beck as well, just like Trey Lance did. Kyle Shanahan went to Justin Fields' pro day. Kyle Shanahan wanted to add mobility to the quarterback room, but he wanted to add mobility that he felt fit best within his pocket passing system, the play action based under center pocket passing system. Kyle Shanahan felt that Trey Lance executed those pocket responsibilities better than Justin Fields. So even if Justin Fields is a little bit faster than Trey Lance, or even if he could heave a slightly longer deep ball, which I'm not sure he can, I'm just saying even if Trey Lance was Kyle Shanahan's pick. What do you think was the deciding factor for Kyle between Lance and Fields, who he had? So this is from David T. That's the same answer as what I just gave. The differentiating factor was Shanahan's determination that Lance has better pro potential from the pocket. That's not to say that Fields won't be a great player. I think that he's going to be a good player. I think he was very accurate in college. But Kyle Shanahan has a lot more information than we do. He sees the reads, he sees the decision making, and he thought that Trey Lance was better in that aspect of the game. I'm not so sure that Jimmy Garoppolo was ranked in the 20s. That's the last one. I mean, if you're including the injury issues, somehow lumping that all in together with performance, sure. But that's intentionally obtuse to lump in Jimmy Garoppolo's injury performance and issues with his performance, because now the 49ers have two quarterbacks. We could divide those two things. When Garoppolo is hurt, if that does happen, they have another quarterback. So it doesn't really matter what's going on when Garoppolo's hurt. When he's healthy, he's definitely been better than a something in the 20s kind of guy. All of his efficiency metrics were between 5 and 11 in 2019. So if he's operating this offense at a number 5 to number 11 clip, efficiency-wise, in 2021, and he stays healthy, that's the guy that Jimmy Garoppolo is. Now, if he gets hurt, of course, from a value perspective, you can dock him because he gets hurt. And that's why the 49ers wanted to insulate the quarterback room, right? And they did. But we should be having two separate discussions now. We should be having the healthy Jimmy Garoppolo discussion and the hurt Jimmy Garoppolo discussion. And right now he's healthy. Because when he's hurt, we could start talking about Trey Lance, because Trey Lance is going to play right away. But when Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy, he brings a lot to the table. And that's absolutely something to keep in mind here moving into 2021. How do you know that Fields was better from the pocket? Have you seen every single snap of all 22? Do you know the plays that were called? Do you know where Fields was supposed to go with the football? I guarantee that you don't. And Kyle Shanahan was in a better position to make that call than a random comment on here. The definition of play from the pocket is much more complicated than looking at a simple accuracy stat. Let's put it that way. Well, yeah, obviously Trey Lance is light years ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo in the run game, and he was taken 3rd overall because of that. But not only because of that, you spend $26 million on Jimmy Garoppolo this year because he's still very far ahead of Trey Lance in the pocket passing game. Now you hope that Trey Lance catches up. I mean, the guy was playing FCS football 2 years ago, and that was his last extended action. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to put our heads around that. It's going to take a little while for Trey Lance to develop, just like it's going to take some time for Mac Jones to develop in New England, Justin Fields to develop in Chicago. You keep Jimmy Garoppolo because he's been a top 10 efficiency guy when healthy for you. I mean, it's as simple as that. Would you cut extra linebackers that made your team better too? Would you cut extra defensive ends that made your team better just because you could only have one? No, you wouldn't. You keep as many of the good guys as possible, especially when your veteran is more ready to play right now. It's 1 + 1 = 2 kind of stuff. And the 49ers will get the savings. You don't only get the savings in 1 year. You can get the savings of the rookie quarterback over several seasons. But it's not the whole point of a rookie quarterback is they get cap savings. The point of a rookie quarterback is to get somebody you can develop into transcendence when you pick him that high. One of the side benefits is obviously the cap savings. But if you can budget for both, as the 49ers have, you can do both. And then you can get the cap savings down the road. It's not like it's the only season where you get the cap savings. You only save when it makes efficient sense to actually save. You don't save just for the hell of saving. There's two things could be true at once here, guys. We can't be this black and white about it. In fact, it's black and white thinking that drew people into the Mac Jones trap. It just had everybody read this wrong because we didn't look at it with nuance. And I've been trying to look at it with nuance this whole time, and there's nuance at play here, and that's why they have both Garoppolo and Lance. I mean, I just explained it for 25 minutes, so just go back to that part. All right, a couple more questions, and we'll be done with this. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. This is a good question from Matthew Fritos. Do you think Kyle and John felt the interior line blocking issues are the biggest issues for Jimmy Garoppolo's injuries? I think they think those are very high up the list. Obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo did not get good enough pass protection so far throughout his time as the 49ers starting quarterback. The pass protection of the 49ers have tossed out, though, over the past few years has not even been good enough for Trey Lance. And I would say that Trey Lance will probably need better pass protection than Jimmy Garoppolo early in his career, just because he's a rookie, just because he's early. He's coming from the FCS. You need to protect the guy. You need to progress. You need to protect your investment. So in this situation, the 49ers, I think this is something nobody's talking about. I'm trying to talk about it, but not many people are talking about it. The big move and the big investment of the offseason, obviously aside from the massive investment in number 3 in Trey Lance, was a doubling down and just a surge of capital into the offensive line, particularly the interior offensive line. We know, obviously, they spent record money on Trent Williams at left tackle, right? Then they went out and they spent a second-round pick on Aaron Banks, and then they spent a 5th-round pick on Jalen Moore. Both of those guys are beefy. Both of those guys project well in pass protection, and both of those guys project to help solve the problem on the interior of the offensive line. The 49ers also obviously signed Alex Mack, who is Shanahan's prototypical center, NFL center of the decade for the 2010s. I mean, this is a big-time investment in the offensive line this offseason, and that's why I view it as probably the most key development of the 49ers offseason for the short term, because what that investment in the offensive line is going to do is it's going to protect both Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. The futures of Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance and the potential successes of both of those quarterbacks are very, very much tied to the offensive line and its pass protection in front of them. And that's why I think that the big investment there can help prevent Jimmy Garoppolo from getting injured again. It can help Jimmy Garoppolo be more efficient because they've been ranked near the bottom of pass protection ever since Shanahan took over. And it can obviously set the table for Trey Lance to have the illustrious career that the 49ers hope. All right, well, I'm going to do one of these like every day. So if you have any more questions about this, go ahead and ask later on. I hope that this whole thing wraps up the 49ers quarterback saga of the offseason well. And now we'll move to training camp where Garoppolo will be QB1, Lance will be QB2, and the 49ers will hope that Lance progresses as quickly as possible. And they'll hope that Garoppolo keeps playing really well because he looked really good during OTAs. But I just wanted to put a bow on the just wild offseason and hopefully address some of the crazy misinformation that's been out there. And hopefully that sets the record straight. So thanks everybody for your follow. Make sure to tell all your friends about the channel. I'm trying to make this as interactive as possible, and make sure you subscribe to The Athletic. Anyway, everybody have a great Monday afternoon. Take care, everybody.